Before we dive into some of the most disturbing cases the internet has ever touched, I need you to do something for me. Hit that subscribe button and leave a like on this video. Trust me, you're going to want to follow along for what comes next, and your support helps us bring these forgotten stories into the light. Now, let's begin. The internet is a strange place. It can unite millions of strangers to solve cold cases that stumped police for decades. It can give voices to the voiceless and justice to those who were forgotten. But it can also spread misinformation, turn tragedy into entertainment, and sometimes make dark mysteries even darker. Today, we're exploring 17 disturbing cases where the internet played a pivotal role, for better or worse. Some of these stories found resolution because of online sleuths. Others became twisted beyond recognition, and a few remain unsolved, haunting message boards and forums to this very day. What you're about to hear isn't easy. These are real people, real families torn apart, real monsters hiding in plain sight. So if you're ready to venture into the darkest corners of true crime, where the digital age meets real-world horror, stay with me. This is going to be a long journey. In the autumn of the year 2000, census workers fanned out across Tokyo, going door to door, counting heads, checking addresses, documenting the lives hidden behind closed doors. One worker had been assigned to Kamedo, a quiet residential district in East Tokyo, the kind of neighborhood where young professionals rented modest apartments and went about their anonymous lives. For 3 days straight, from September 26th to the 28th, he knocked on the door of room 604 in the Rec Kamedo Green Mansion apartment complex. Nobody answered. Not unusual. People work, people travel. People ignore strangers at their door. But on Friday, September 29th, something changed. As he approached Unit 604 once more, a sour, almost chemical stench hit him. It was seeping from the ventilation fan, spilling into the corridor like something desperate to escape. Suspicious, he contacted the building manager, who arrived just after 1 p.m. The manager tried the handle. The door was unlocked. They stepped inside. The smell was overwhelming now, heavy and unmistakable. The smell of decay. In the bedroom, they found her. 28-year-old Yoko Yoshida, a manga artist who wrote under the pen name Tsukisaki Cool, was lying face up on a futon, wearing only a t-shirt, undressed from the waist down. A white cloth had been placed carefully across her face. Her skin had turned brown, her body bloated. She had been dead for at least 10 days. Faint marks around her neck told the story. Someone had strangled her to death with their bare hands. Nothing in the room had been disturbed. Her wallet, her bank book, her cards, and roughly 3 million yen in cash, that's about $27,000, were sitting untouched on her desk. Despite her state of undress, there were no signs of sexual assault, no male DNA, no signs of struggle. It was as if she had simply laid down and let death come for her. But there was one curious detail that unsettled the detectives. A spare key, one which Yoko always kept inside the apartment, was found lying in the hallway outside her door. Beyond that, there was nothing. No fingerprints, no CCTV footage, no forced entry. The conclusion was inescapable. Yoko had either willingly let her killer into the apartment, or the killer already had access. And here's where the internet enters the story, because Yoko Yoshida wasn't just any manga artist. She was part of Tokyo's underground comic scene, creating BL doujinshi, niche LGBT romance stories that she self-published and sold at conventions. She wasn't a household name, but within her community, she was known. She had fans, she had friends, and crucially, she had printed her real home address in the back of her books. This was common practice in the 1990s. Independent artists listed their addresses so fans could send them letters, fan art, or orders. But it also meant that any fan, any stranger, any opportunist knew exactly where Yoko Yoshida lived. Any of them could have shown up unannounced. And Yoko, known for being kind and trusting, might have invited them in for tea. But there was another darker possibility. Throughout the 90s and early 2000s, doujin artists who rarely earned enough to survive on their work alone were often targeted by scouts from the adult entertainment industry, vultures who would troll comic conventions, buy a book, copy the address from the colophon, and later show up at the artist's apartment with a pitch. A high-paying part-time job, easy money. According to people who knew her, Yoko had started working nights at a members-only club in Shibuya and was allegedly working as a call girl for wealthy clients. Among her customers, it was rumored, were minor celebrities and comedians. Police noted the expensive designer bags and high-end jewelry found in her room. Things she never wore, things that didn't match her quirky, thrifted style. Investigators suspected these were gifts from rich clients and that 3 million yen in cash suggested payment. Reports claimed that at her peak, Yoko earned between 30 to 50,000 yen per night, roughly $280 to $470, though demand had begun to fall as she got older, and she was reportedly preparing to quit and move back in with her parents. The question became obvious. Could one of those clients have taken things too far? Investigators interviewed Yoko's coworkers and her employer, but nothing concrete emerged. Some believe her workplace was protecting their powerful clients. Others say the customers themselves quietly shut down the inquiry. With no viable suspects, the investigation stalled, and then 4 years later, the case was thrust back into the spotlight thanks to a television program that often revisited cold cases. During the broadcast, a British man named Chris Robinson, known professionally as the Psychic Dreamer, was brought on to help solve Yoko's case. He claimed to have worked with MI5 and said he could dream crime scenes in advance. Through his so-called visions, he claimed to have seen the killer leave Yoko's building, go to the local train station, and board a blue streetcar. He even produced a sketch of the suspect, a man between 25 and 35 years old, around 5'5", medium build, South Asian, with deep-set features. His desperate bid for attention resulted in dozens of callers contacting the show, accusing various foreign residents of being the culprit. Among those callers was a man known simply as Mr. A, who claimed to be Yoko's manager. He told producers that he possessed a letter written by Yoko shortly before her death, in which she described being harassed by a foreign stalker. The letter read, "I might be killed in 2 or 3 days. I have a feeling I'm being watched. The person is a fan of my work and lives in my neighborhood. He writes strange notes to me every day, and he isn't Japanese, which scares me even more." Behind his back, the show had the letter analyzed by a specialist who stated with 100% certainty that the handwriting didn't match Yoko's. It did, however, match perfectly with Mr. A's. On camera, Mr. A was confronted. Under pressure, he admitted he wasn't Yoko's manager at all and that he had forged the note out of jealousy. As a fellow cartoonist and part of Yoko's inner circle, he felt overshadowed by her modest success. Police never named him as a suspect, but the incident cast a long shadow over the investigation, muddying public perception and leading to years of speculation involving foreign stalkers. Mr. A never faced any repercussions for trying to pin the blame on a local foreigner. Nor did the psychic dreamer, Chris Robinson. One's a proven liar. The other may just be delusional. But what if this pair had succeeded and an innocent man was arrested? Would they have come clean? Somehow, I doubt it. The mystery of who killed Yoko Yoshida remains unsolved to this day. Some believe a fellow artist could have been involved. Others point to her clientele, and one Japanese YouTuber has put forward a chilling theory that Yoko wasn't killed in her apartment at all, but in another unit inside the same complex, and that her body was moved back later using her own key. In this version, the killer was a fellow resident with private access, someone who knew Yoko was planning to move out soon, and who panicked when the census worker came around. This theory suggests the killer switched on the ventilation fan on the morning of the 29th to force the smell into the corridor, left the door unsecured, and dropped her spare key in the hallway. A calculated bit of staging. 25 years later, the Tokyo Metropolitan Police still list Yoko Yoshida's murder as an active investigation, one of many unsolved cases from that era that slipped through the cracks. The internet hasn't solved this one. If anything, it's made it more complicated, filled with false leads and fabricated evidence. But the story refuses to die. Online forums still discuss it. True crime communities still theorize. And somewhere out there, someone knows what really happened in room 604. If you're finding this case as haunting as I am, go ahead and hit that like button. It helps more people discover these stories. And trust me, we're just getting started. Japan has long been cited as one of the safest countries in the world. Small children walk to school alone. People leave their laptops unattended in cafes. Commuters doze off on trains without clutching their bags. For many locals, danger feels distant, something that happens elsewhere. But that perception doesn't tell the whole story. While Japan's overall crime rate is indeed low, violence against women and girls remains a persistent problem, one that's deeply underreported. The result is a society that appears safe on the surface, but hides a darker undercurrent, one where predators exploit trust and complacency. Nana Sakoma was born in 1978 in Chiba Prefecture, just east of Tokyo. Her parents divorced when she was young, and she grew up with her mother and grandmother in a modest single-story apartment. To keep the household afloat, her mother worked long nights as a hostess at a local bar. And while she was away, Nana's elderly grandmother was lenient with rules. It wasn't unusual for Nana to stay up late or wander the neighborhood after dark, but there was nothing to worry about. Omirai was a tight-knit community. Most locals knew the bright, well-mannered Sakoma girl by name. In 1991, Nana began her first year at Omiya Junior High School. She was 13 years old, confident, sociable, full of energy. On October 26th, just after midterm exams, Nana and 3 of her female classmates spent the day playing together. As the sun set, they still felt like they hadn't had enough fun, so Nana suggested they all go back to her apartment to hang out. Her mother was working, and her grandmother wouldn't mind. Together, the group rode their bikes to Nana's flat and spent the evening watching TV, chatting, laughing quietly while Granny slept. By midnight, the girls had grown hungry. They checked the kitchen, but there were no leftovers in the fridge. Nana proposed going out to buy some rice balls and snacks at the nearby convenience store. When they got there, however, they discovered the shop was already closed. One girl remembered there was a 24-hour mini-stop about 4 kilometers away. They all agreed to ride there instead. Half an hour later, they reached the store, bought supplies, and started cycling back. At around 1 a.m., while leading the way through a particularly dark stretch of road, Nana turned her head to check on her friends. While doing so, she hit a large branch, one which had likely been blown from a tree by a recent typhoon. It sent Nana tumbling from her bike. It wasn't a bad fall, and the other 3 stopped to help her up. And at that precise moment, a man appeared behind them. He was about 50, wearing a horizontally striped long-sleeve shirt, black trousers, and a black knitted cap. His face was round, his eyes long and sharp, his cheeks flushed red. He stood near a billboard with his hands in his pockets and barked out, "What do you think you're doing?" His tone was so harsh that the 4 girls froze. The man stepped closer. Now, beside the girls, he claimed to be a local youth guidance counselor and said that under Japanese regulations, it was illegal for minors to be out past 11 p.m. without a guardian. At the time, official counselors did volunteer throughout the country to prevent juvenile delinquency. Most were women. Most worked in groups. Few worked past 9 p.m., and all of them wore badges, armbands, and carried ID. This man showed no identification and immediately threatened to call the police, but added that he might change his mind if the group had a good excuse. Frightened and ashamed, the girls lowered their heads and stayed silent. "You kids have been sniffing paint thinner, haven't you?" the man said, scowling. He told them that a representative had to come with him to a police box and explain everything. After scanning their faces, he pointed directly at Nana. "You, come with me." Perhaps out of fear or compliance, Nana didn't argue. He was an authority figure. She simply followed him as he led her toward a small side road. As she disappeared from view, the man turned back to the remaining 3 girls and bluntly stated, "You don't have to wait. Go home." When one of them asked what to do about Nana's bike, he replied without looking back, "I'll use my truck to transport it later." Taking the counselor at his word, the 3 girls rode back to Nana's apartment complex and waited for her outside. 30 minutes turned into an hour. An hour turned into an hour and a half. Growing increasingly anxious, they told 2 boys they knew from school everything. The boys thought the whole situation sounded strange and advised them to tell Nana's family immediately. Since Nana had the only key, they banged on the door until her grandmother woke up, shaken. The grandmother called Nana's mother, who rushed home. Together they searched the Wakaba district, including the narrow alley where Nana had last been seen. But terrifyingly, they found no trace of the missing girl or the stern man who had led her away. They called the police at 4:20 a.m., only to be told something chilling. There hadn't been any youth guidance counselors on duty along that route. Nana Sakoma was 13 years old when she vanished into the night. She was never seen again. Authorities scoured the local roads, knocked on doors, released a sketch based on the girls' descriptions. In time, witnesses began to come forward. Several people reported seeing a suspicious man, matching the sketch wandering near a driving school about 1 kilometer from where Nana was taken. Others claim to have seen a girl with an adult walking along different streets in the area around the same time. Over 150 officers searched the 4-kilometer radius, but no evidence connected to the crime was found. No ransom call was ever made. No further leads presented themselves. The man's confident approach suggested this may not have been his first rodeo, but investigators were unable to link Nana's disappearance to any other missing persons reports. Despite leaflets, sketches, and endless investigations, the case stagnated. Decades passed. The other girls grew up, had kids of their own. But Nana never came home. Her grandmother died within a year of her disappearance, reportedly from shock and guilt. Her mother moved away after their apartment was demolished. She still visits shrines, bowing and praying for her daughter's safe return, a prospect that feels more and more impossible with each passing year. To this day, discussion continues on internet forums. Some find it hard to believe that an opportunistic kidnapper just happened to be in that precise spot where Nana fell. His comment about putting her bike in the back of his van suggested he may have been following the group in a vehicle. But if so, none of the girls saw or heard him before he suddenly emerged from the darkness. Others have a more chilling theory that the large branch lying across that pitch-black stretch of road hadn't been blown there by strong winds, but had been strategically placed, that the man was hiding in the shadows just off the roadside, watching, waiting, hoping that some unsupervised child would spring his trap. One Japanese investigator has explored the theory that a man arrested in the late 1960s for impersonating a juvenile officer to lure schoolgirls may be connected to Nana's case. This suspect had a history of using the same tactics, and in 1991, he would have been around 52 years old, matching witness descriptions. He's currently 86 and still lives close to where Nana disappeared. This theory remains unconfirmed. Years later, rumors circulated that the route Nana was taken from was used by foreign operatives throughout the 90s, raising the possibility that she was smuggled to another country. No concrete evidence supports that theory. The statute of limitations in this case expired before Japan's legal revisions, meaning that if the perpetrator is ever identified, legally speaking, he'll be untouchable. The internet has kept Nana's story alive, but it hasn't brought her home. If anything, the endless speculation, the theories, the rabbit holes have only made the mystery more painful for those who loved her. Sometimes the internet doesn't solve cases. Sometimes it just keeps wounds open. We're about halfway through, and I want to take a moment to ask you something. If these stories are affecting you the way they're affecting me, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. These cases deserve to be remembered, and your engagement helps ensure they won't be forgotten. Now let's continue. Fortune tellers, mystics, spiritual advisors. There's no shortage of them in Japan. On any given day, you'll see their shops on busy streets offering palm readings or tarot card sessions for a couple thousand yen. Most are harmless hustlers selling vague hope to the superstitious, but not all of them are playing games. In the case of 74-year-old Hirohito Shiba, things were far more sinister. Unlike the street corner psychics, Shiba ran his operation from a private residence in Higashi Yamato, a quiet residential community in West Tokyo. Neighbors noticed an unsettling pattern: a steady flow of women, both new assistants and new clients, entering his home but almost never leaving. After just one visit, he somehow convinced each of them to drop their families, their obligations, their entire lives, and marry him one after another. By early 2023, he had built himself a polygamy cult consisting of 9 wives and 3 children he had fathered with them. These women weren't just followers, they were obsessed, devoted, and that devotion made no sense to outsiders. Shiba wasn't young, he wasn't charming in any conventional way, but what he lacked in looks, he made up for in manipulative charisma. Shiba began building his network of so-called concubine brides as early as the year 2000 after setting up his fortune-telling business. In his own words, he had discovered the power of a seduction spell in a dream, one which made him popular with women and young girls, a way to brainwash them and have them obey his every whim. What he called magic, most would call psychological manipulation. Gradually, he lured women aged between 20 and 49 to his home by placing ads in the local paper for fortune-telling assistants. From there, the pattern was almost always the same. Shiba would isolate his target, plant the fear of supernatural harm, and present himself as the only person who could protect her. "A demonic soul is haunting you," he'd say. "Only I can save you from it." Incredibly, many believed him wholeheartedly and chose to devote their lives to their savior. Once he had a woman under his control, he'd only allow them to leave his home unaccompanied to work and bring home money. On average, each wife was bringing home 80,000 yen per month, all of which went directly to Shiba. Determined to increase both his bank balance and bride balance, he ordered each wife to recruit new members from their workplace. But those co-workers weren't always as gullible. So when psychological manipulation failed, Shiba would resort to blackmail and intimidation. In 2006, he was arrested after threatening a woman in her 20s, forcing her to live with him, and in the words of prosecutors, scaring her into consenting to intercourse. When the woman didn't fall for Shiba's usual mind tricks, he told her, "If you don't do what I say, you'll be chopped up, minced, and processed at a nearby factory." He also stated that if she ever tried to leave, she'd be, quote, "rounded up." Thankfully, the woman eventually escaped and went to the authorities. The media didn't take Shiba's crimes seriously at the time, referring to him in headlines as harem man and treating his antics as more of a joke than anything serious. Though accused of polygamy, Shiba technically hadn't broken the law, as he divorced each wife shortly after marrying them. The only things he was found guilty of were coercion and intimidation. In court, he promised the judge he would stop living with multiple women. "I never want to do anything like this again," he said. The judge gave him a 1-year, 6-month sentence, suspended for 4 years. Shiba didn't spend a single day in prison. After the 2006 case, many parents arrived at Shiba's home to pick up their brainwashed daughters. According to locals, they stood outside day and night for months, but their daughters never came out. Shiba put up "Keep Out" signs and installed around 10 security cameras. The parents simply gave up. Over time, neighbors noted that those formerly blonde girls in high heels and ultra-mini skirts grew old in the house alongside Mr. Shiba. Unsurprisingly, he had carried on controlling his victims, not with chains, but with fear. Fear of curses, of spirits, and later, of alien abduction. In mid-2022, a teenage girl, was lured to Shiba's home by his 43-year-old wife. Once inside, Shiba emerged in a black hooded robe, cornered the girl, and forced her to watch television footage of aliens and UFOs for around 6 hours in an attempt to make her believe in their existence. During that session, Shiba reportedly told her, "You're going to die soon. You'll be abducted by aliens, skinned, and eaten. They'll replace you with a copy of yourself." The only way to avoid such a fate, he told the girl, was to allow him to have his way with her. He tried to pull the same trick again on another teenager his wife brought home. Thankfully, the second girl spoke to her family, who contacted the police. When officers knocked on Shiba's door on February 7th, 2023, the old man resisted by spraying bear repellent through a crack in the door, injuring 6 policemen. Eventually, they forced entry. Shiba and his wife were arrested on suspicion of coerced intercourse. In court, Shiba stated, "I've met an alien before. I was told there was a plan to reduce the world's population and that Japanese women were being targeted. I was told the only way to save them was to have relations with them." The jury was unconvinced. However, in December 2024, one of Shiba's wives was discovered dead inside the residence. Then, in January 2025, just one day before his sentence ruling, Shiba's remaining wives found him dead inside the house. Authorities determined he had taken his own life. Hirohito Shiba's sudden death closed the legal case but left countless questions unanswered. How many wives did he control over the decades? How many still live with the trauma? The internet brought attention to this case, but it came too late. Before she became a viral meme, Yuka Takaoka was by all accounts an ordinary young woman trying to find her place in Tokyo. Born in China, she moved to Japan when she was 2 and grew up quietly in Hokkaido. After finishing school, she moved to the capital to study design. But like many young newcomers, she struggled to find stability. She eventually shifted into the nightlife industry, starting at a girls' bar before transitioning to full-time hostessing in Kabukicho. What most people outside Japan don't realize is just how circular that world really is. Hostesses spend their nights comforting lonely men, flattering them, listening to their problems. But when their shift ends, many fall into the same emotional dependencies they see in their customers. In Shinjuku, it's an open secret. Many hostesses spend their entire earnings on hosts, the male counterpart to their own job. It's a cycle of loneliness. The fantasy relationships they perform for clients become the ones they start craving for themselves. That's how Yuka met the man who would dominate her thoughts, a club fusion host known as Runa. In nightlife circles, he was a rising star, stylish, effortlessly charming, soft-spoken, skilled at making any woman feel like she mattered. For most of his customers, it was a scripted fantasy they willingly bought into. For Yuka, though, it was real. Thoughts of Runa consumed her mind. She started visiting him 3 times a week, reportedly spending upwards of 50,000 yen per visit and racking up huge debt. To keep up with her visits, she began working for a delivery health service, a common euphemism for escort work. She hated it and never told Runa the truth, inventing a story about a sugar daddy who took her on trips in exchange for cash. Runa personally thanked her for going on those vacations. After all, the money she spent on him helped improve his host ranking. And when it came to making money, Runa was extremely driven. He casually tossed around words like, "I love you," which meant little to him, but everything to Yuka. He even took her to love hotels after his shift to keep her loyal, just like he did with many other customers. Yuka always paid for the room. To cut out the middleman, Yuka leased an apartment near Runa's workplace, certain they were destined to be together. She told friends she wanted to, quote, devote herself entirely to him. If Runa failed to answer one of her calls, if one of her messages went unread, if he refused to come see her, she would threaten to jump off the rooftop. But he didn't see things that way. Runa cared about Yuka on some level, but at the end of the day, he was a host. His job depended on being available and flirtatious. Having a public girlfriend could destroy his sales. By May 2019, the tension had curdled. After having drinks with a female client on the 22nd, Runa stopped by Yuka's apartment to help her clean and put up some curtains. Exhausted, he ran a bath, dozed off in the tub, and later collapsed into Yuka's bed. While he slept, Yuka went through his phone and discovered photos of him sitting with another woman at the bar. The pictures showed nothing intimate. He was just doing his job, but in Yuka's increasingly unstable mind, it was proof of an unforgivable betrayal. At around 3:50 a.m. on the 23rd, Yuka walked quietly into the kitchenette, took a fruit knife, and returned to the bedroom. She knelt beside Runa, watched him for a moment, and then plunged the blade into his abdomen with enough force to puncture internal organs. Runa woke up. At first, feeling no pain, he asked Yuka what she was doing. That's when she removed the blade. As it scraped its way out, the agony hit. He crawled into the hallway, leaving a trail of blood. He made it out of the apartment, toward the elevator, into the lobby. Yuka followed slowly, watching. She asked Runa whether he loved her. He responded, "Yes, just call an ambulance." "No," she replied, "let's die together." A neighbor hearing faint cries called emergency services. When officers arrived, they found exactly the scene a bystander would later photograph. Yuka sitting beside the bleeding host, her shirt soaked with his blood, her expression flat and distant. She was on the phone with a friend, talking casually about other matters. That image exploded across Japanese Twitter, then the global internet. She was instantly labeled the real-life Yandere. In Japanese fiction, a Yandere is a character who starts off sweet and affectionate, but becomes possessive, delusional, and violent. Yuka, with her blunt-cut bangs, delicate features, and chillingly calm demeanor, seemed to fit that archetype with unnerving precision. Obsessives would later start a GoFundMe to bail her out and raised around $3,000. Runa slipped into a coma for nearly a week. Doctors said he only had a 20% chance of survival. Yet miraculously, he pulled through. He spent more than a month in hospital, unable at first to speak or walk. Nightmares tormented him, recurring visions of Yuka crawling through his hospital window. However, he later said he bore no hatred toward her, understood her point of view, and was working on becoming a better person himself. Following the incident, Runa rebranded himself as Phoenix Runa, a nod to his close call with death. Despite no longer being able to drink due to liver damage, he's now a more popular host than before. Known as the boy to kill for, his earnings have increased substantially. Meanwhile, Yuka underwent psychiatric evaluation and confessed immediately. In handwritten letters, she said, "I stabbed him because I love him so much I couldn't help it." In December 2019, the Tokyo District Court sentenced her to 3 years and 6 months in prison. Many considered it shockingly lenient for attempted murder. She reached a civil settlement with Runa, reportedly around 5 million yen, and sent him an apology letter. The judge took that into account. After the incident, Yuka became an online icon. Fans flooded social media with artwork, cosplays, tribute videos, and memes, all dedicated to Yandere-chan. Even today, long after her release, she remains a popular figure online with tens of thousands of followers. To some, she's a cautionary tale about the host club ecosystem. To others, disturbingly, she's an icon. In reality, Yuka Takaoka is just a young woman whose loneliness spiraled into delusion and whose obsession nearly cost a man his life. The internet turned her into something she wasn't: a meme, a joke, an aesthetic. And in doing so, it erased the real horror of what happened. Make sure you've hit that like button if you're still with me, because we're about to leave Japan and venture into cases from around the world where the internet played an even stranger role. September 13th, 2025 began like any other day in Hanoi. The sun was shining. The streets were buzzing with scooters, motorbikes, trucks, and daily life. Among the many commuters that morning was 15-year-old Wen Ha, a high school student on her electric motorbike. It had been a gift from her parents, one they had saved for months to afford. The Wens were a poor family who didn't have much to spare, but in their minds, it was a worthwhile investment. Their daughter had just been accepted into her dream school, and the bike meant she could make the journey each day. The family had celebrated, believing brighter days lay ahead. Unfortunately, Wen never made it to her second week of classes. At around 9:20 a.m., while passing beneath the Van Mo Bridge, she was struck by a concrete mixer. The truck sent her and her bike skidding across the road. It was an accident, plain and simple. But what happened next was barbaric beyond belief. After the initial collision, the driver checked on Wen, realized she was still alive, and then continued to drive with her under his wheels, dragging her along the asphalt. Witnesses described the scene as harrowing, saying the young girl was almost torn in half. Locals rushed to pull her from the road and raced her to hospital, but there was nothing doctors could do. Within hours, the teenager was pronounced dead. That evening, the truck driver calmly walked into the local police station and turned himself in. He was later identified as 51-year-old Din Van Long. According to police reports, he confessed that after striking the girl, he had made the conscious decision to drag her under his wheels to ensure she died. His reasoning was as cold as it was calculated. Because of Vietnamese laws, if Wen survived, he would have to pay for her treatment and any future medical fees. If she died, however, he'd only owe her family a fixed amount in compensation. Officers thought Long had to be joking, that he must have been under the influence. But toxicology tests revealed no alcohol or drugs in his system. His decision hadn't been made in a haze. It was made with full awareness. On Vietnamese forums, a rumor known as the underground law of the road has circulated for years. The idea that for some drivers, it's cheaper to kill a crash victim than let them live. A survivor brings lifelong compensation, hospital bills, therapy bills, public shame. A fatality brings only a single payment, and more often than not, a simple traffic citation. Truckers have been overheard joking about this grim calculation at roadside cafes. But cases like this have shown that some aren't joking. Long has since been detained on charges of premeditated murder. His trial has yet to begin, though if convicted, he could face Vietnam's harshest penalty, death. Wen was known as a devoted daughter, one who helped around the house, cared for her younger sibling, and never spent money needlessly, knowing how hard her parents worked. She had told friends she wanted to help her family, to make life better for them, but she never got the chance, because in the mind of the driver who hit her, her life had a value. It just wasn't one he was willing to pay. Russian influencer Anastasia Kumlovskaya, known as Nastya, undoubtedly had a difficult start in life. Born in 1996, she was abandoned by her father and raised mostly by her mother. For years, the two were technically homeless, scraping to get by, sharing a bed in a hostel. When her mother moved cities for work, she sent Anastasia to live with her paternal grandmother. The babushka recognized Anastasia's artistic talents early on. She bought her paints, encouraged her creativity, and controversially took her to get her first tattoo at 15. From then on, Anastasia adopted the mantra, "I am the canvas," and turned her body into a portfolio. By 18, she had covered herself head to toe in ink. Coming from a poor background, she was determined to make something of her life. She went to college to study computing and automotive mechanics. But more than anything, Anastasia wanted to be seen. She came of age right when social media made fame feel attainable, especially for someone with a distinctive aesthetic and provocative mindset. Online, she adopted the name Gishman and began posting photos of her tattoos, body mods, and cosplay shoots. Gradually, she amassed a sizable fan base, reaching more than 300,000 followers across TikTok, VK, and Instagram. She sold art prints, tattoo appointments, offered courses in design and computing, transforming her online fame into legitimate business. Eventually, she earned enough to move into her own flat in St. Petersburg. Anastasia understood that success online required consistency. She kept her fans engaged with a steady stream of posts every day. So when that stream suddenly stopped in early August 2022, eyebrows began to raise. At first, her account still appeared active, but the posts were old, recycled content from months earlier. Concerned friends reached out, but Anastasia's replies were always vague. "I'm feeling sick. I don't want to talk right now. I'll be back soon." It sounded like her, but not quite. Taking matters into their own hands, Anastasia's loved ones called the police on August 10th and asked them to perform a welfare check. When officers arrived at her flat, they were met with a sickly smell seeping from under her door. They forced their way inside and found Anastasia's body in the bathtub. She had been stabbed over a dozen times, first in the bedroom, then dragged to the bathroom and left there for a week to decompose in the heat. Police initially considered whether this had been a break-in gone wrong or the result of an encounter with a deranged fan, but they didn't have to ponder long. Within 24 hours, they had their main suspect in custody, Anastasia's 24-year-old husband, Dmitry Chernyshov. They found him laying low in a nearby motel. Anastasia's phone was in his possession. According to investigators, after killing Anastasia, Dmitry used her device to impersonate her online, replying to messages, posting on her socials to make it appear she was still alive. He even took things further, pushing a sale of her courses and selling her possessions on marketplaces, an attempt to squeeze money out of Anastasia's audience while she lay butchered in her flat. It's unclear what Dmitry's endgame was, as he seemingly hadn't made any effort to move her body. Instead, he had sprayed her with perfume and taped up vents and pipes to mask the smell of decomposition. Dimitri's defense was unusual. He initially claimed Anastasia had asked him to end her existence, that it was a mercy killing. According to prosecutors, however, his true motives were jealousy, greed, and control. Dimitri was involved in the adult content world and had made most of his income starring in uploads with his ex-partners. When he was introduced to rising star Anastasia by his then-girlfriend Margarita, the ruble signs rolled in his eyes. Behind Margarita's back, he lavished Anastasia with gifts, bonded with her over their shared love of cars, and wormed his way into her life. After becoming a couple, Dimitri began acting as Anastasia's manager. Soon, she began featuring in his home movies, which he uploaded to generate income. According to friends, Anastasia became more quiet and reclusive. They suspected Dimitri was exerting control, that he wouldn't let her say no to any of his demands. A few months before her death, Anastasia appeared on a daytime talk show alongside her mother to discuss the adult film industry. Her mother voiced concern she was being coerced and stated her daughter had brought dishonor to the family name. Midway through the broadcast, Dimitri's ex-girlfriend Margarita came forward and described how he had beaten, strangled, and exploited her. Dimitri, sitting nearby, dismissed her claims. Anastasia stood by him, saying she had always wanted to make explicit content and that Dimitri had never struck her. She even laughed at Margarita's distress, but Margarita's story was a warning Anastasia should have heeded. After the broadcast, Dimitri stopped working and became completely dependent on the income Anastasia generated. Neighbors later reported hearing frequent arguments and thuds from their flat. Their relationship quickly deteriorated. Dimitri moved out, and Anastasia reportedly began spending time with a fellow TikToker named Kirill. It's alleged Dimitri heard about this new friendship and arrived at her apartment that August night in a jealous rage. When he entered, he no doubt saw the packed boxes. Anastasia was moving away. She had long dreamed of opening a tattoo studio in South Korea, a place Dimitri couldn't follow her. Because of his prior convictions, Russian law barred him from leaving the country. Prosecutors argued Dimitri could feel his wife, his sole source of income, slipping away, and decided that if he couldn't have her and her money, then nobody could. The very first thing he did after taking Anastasia's life was message Kirill from her phone, saying she never wanted to see him again. In 2024, the district court found Dimitri guilty and sentenced him to 8 years in a remote penal colony known as Polar Wolf. Conditions there are said to be nightmarish, with sub-zero temperatures and near constant darkness. But many feel his punishment amounts to a slap on the wrist. The daytime talk show that had previously hosted Anastasia returned with a special episode that sensationalized her death. After the broadcast, many people mocked Anastasia, questioning why such attention was being given to a, quote, worthless adult actress, while others pointed out the hypocrisy that Anastasia's death was being trivialized because of her association with adult content, while the man who killed her was getting off lightly. Anastasia wasn't a saint, but she didn't deserve to be butchered simply because she wanted out of a toxic relationship. As one final indignation, Anastasia's own mother allowed reporters to film her daughter's funeral in exchange for a fee. If you're still watching, I need you to do one more thing for me. Subscribe to this channel, hit that notification bell, because we're about to dive into the darkest case I've ever covered, and you won't want to miss what comes next. Garan is a city in the highlands of northeastern Brazil, known for its mild mountain climate and lively festivals. To outsiders, it's the kind of place that feels traditional, even wholesome. But behind one unassuming doorway lived a group who believed they were saving the world, one human sacrifice at a time. At the center of this case was Jorge Beltrão Negromonte, a failed philosophy student and martial arts instructor with a chilling past. Growing up, Jorge had reportedly killed a 17-year-old, but was acquitted due to lack of evidence. He later tried to kill his own mother after stealing money from her. In 1984, he married his future accomplice, Isabel Cristina. The ceremony was modest, though the mood was dampened when Jorge pulled out a knife and threatened to kill all the guests. Surprisingly, they lived a fairly normal life for 2 years. Then, in 1986, Jorge met and fell in love with a 16-year-old named Bruna Cristina. Together, Jorge, Isabel, and Bruna formed a bizarre love triangle, though many labeled them a small cult built around Jorge's delusions. Jorge displayed signs of mental illness and declared he had spoken with an angel and a cherub. They had apparently instructed him to purify the world and protect the earth from sin and overpopulation. As part of this so-called purification, he told his wives they had to consume flesh and sacrifice 4 victims, each representing one of the natural elements: air, earth, water, and fire. Once the 4 killings were completed, a portal to paradise would open, allowing the group to ascend. Unbelievably, Isabel and Bruna believed him. Their first known victim was 17-year-old single mother Jessica Camila. When she met the cartel in 2008, she was homeless and struggling to support her 1-year-old daughter. Opening their arms, the cartel invited Jessica into their home under the pretense of offering her a job. But once inside, Jessica was struck over the head and rendered unconscious. The cultists dragged her into a bathroom where they severed her jugular vein and drained her body of blood. Jessica was then skinned, dismembered, seasoned with salt and cumin, and stored in the fridge. The trio later admitted they had eaten Jessica's flesh as part of their purification ritual. What makes the story even more disturbing is that Jessica's infant daughter was given some of her mother's own meat. The cartel decided to keep the child alive and raise her as their own. To the outside world, they appeared an odd but harmless family that supported themselves by selling empanadas and cochinillas at the local market. In February 2012, the group cannibalized 31-year-old Giselle Helena. A few weeks later, they did the same to 20-year-old Alexandra. Both were killed in similar fashion, lured into the cartel's home, struck on the head, stabbed, then sliced up. Neighbors began to notice the group's odd behavior, the smell of decay, the constant burning of incense, the presence of a small child who never attended school. But the investigation really began after Giselle's family reported her missing. Witnesses said they'd last seen her entering the cartel's home, and CCTV footage showed the group using their victims' credit cards. Acting on a tip, police searched their property on April 9, 2012. Immediately, Jessica's child, who was 5 years old, explained how she had seen her father butcher 2 women. In a shallow grave behind the residence, they found human remains belonging to Giselle and Alexandra. Jorge, Isabel, and Bruna were arrested on the spot. The following day, an angry mob of locals set fire to their house. Under questioning, all 3 suspects confessed. They spoke calmly about each incident, claiming they were purging the world of bad people. The police would later say that the salty pastries the group sold which their neighbors loved, were often filled with the preserved flesh of their victims. The trio were tried separately. In 2014, they were convicted. Jorge received just over 21 years, Isabel and Bruna 19. In 2018, they were found guilty of killing Giselle and Alexandra. Jorge's total sentence rose to around 71 years, Isabel's to 68, and Bruna's to 71 years and 10 months. In 2019, their sentences were increased again. Doctors confirmed Jorge suffered from schizophrenia. He was transferred to a secure psychiatric facility to serve his time and has since become the penitentiary's pastor and a published author, having written 4 books. He's also said to now be a vegetarian. As for Jessica's daughter, despite enduring bullying and being called a cannibal repeatedly, she's thankfully grown up to be a healthy and well-adjusted young woman. Eerily, on a Google Earth community, a user shared a disturbing discovery. Using Street View, they managed to find the exact address where the cannibals used to live. By chance, the Google car passed by their house in March 2012, right around the time Alexandra was killed and eaten. If you go to that location and click on that date, the image changes and a person can be seen entering the home. That person is Isabel, forever frozen in time on Street View, either just before or just after she served her final pastry. The internet didn't solve this case, but it inadvertently documented it in the most chilling way possible. On the evening of December 9th, 1998, just after 5 p.m., a farmer was walking home along Fadan Road in Taoyuan, Taiwan, when he noticed flames shooting into the air from a remote stretch of brush. The wind carried not just the smell of smoke, but also of gasoline and something far worse, something like burned meat. Overcome with dread, he crept closer and hid behind a stack of dried grass. He noticed 4 people standing around a fire, their identities obscured by masks and caps. They were talking in low voices and kept glancing around as if worried they might be caught. Sensing something was wrong, the farmer ran home. Along the way, he bumped into his neighbor who had seen the same fire. They went straight inside and called the police. Officers arrived 30 minutes later. By that point, the 4 fire starters were gone. The responders put out the flames and began examining the charred pile. It appeared to be a large sack with something heavy inside. They cut it open and gazed upon its contents. Inside was the body of a young woman, burned beyond recognition. Her face was gone, her clothes mostly incinerated. All that remained was part of a leopard print blouse, a black skirt, and leather ankle boots. On her scorched fingers were 3 rings. Her hands had been tied across her chest, and clutched in her arms was the body of a burned black dog. A few of the officers knew exactly what that symbolized. In rural Taiwanese folklore, a black dog's blood is said to ward off ghosts, to blind a spirit so it can't come back for revenge. The police set about trying to identify the Jane Doe, but the forensic doctor could only narrow down the search so much. They worked out that her cause of death was mechanical asphyxiation, that she had probably been dead less than 48 hours, that she was around 5'5", around 25 to 30 years of age, slim, had perfect teeth, and had a 5-centimeter scar on her left wrist. Detectives rummaged through missing persons reports, but found nobody who matched. They published the case in newspapers and on TV. Still, no one came forward. With no CCTV and 2 eyewitnesses who couldn't see faces, the case stalled. The woman was buried in a cemetery under the name Unidentified Female, Fedan Road. For 20 years, that's how she was known. Then in May 2019, a phone rang at the police station. "I can't take it anymore," said the terrified voice. "She's been haunting me for over half a year. I want to tell you the truth about a murder from decades ago." The caller identified himself as Yihao. He said the unidentified female was a half-Taiwanese, half-Japanese girl named Xiaowen. She was 17 years old and used to work at a betel nut store. He had found the store owners and their associates holding Xiaowen against her will in December 1998. He hadn't dared report it back then. He was only 15 and feared what the others might do. What made him call now was that half a year earlier, he had reconnected with one of the group. While drinking together, he asked whatever happened to that girl. The response was calm. "Oh, she was burned." After that, Yihao kept having nightmares, seeing Xiaowen at night, burned on top of him, pressing him down, asking why he still hadn't reported what he knew. Yihao's tip was promising, but there was a problem. The forensic doctor had been adamant the victim was between 25 and 30 years of age. Xiaowen was 17. Could the doctor really have made such a big mistake? Well, detectives decided to pursue the lead. To their amazement, they learned that on December 25th, 1998, a man had actually reported his 17-year-old Taiwanese-Japanese daughter missing. Her name was Lin Moen, but everyone called her Xiaowen. After immigrating from Japan, she had struggled to adapt to Taiwanese life. Her Mandarin skills weren't up to par, which led to poor grades. Lonely and unhappy, she drifted into the nightlife scene, frequenting clubs, drinking with older men. Her father routinely scolded her and admitted to striking her on occasion. This created a rift, and in 1996, Xiaowen dropped out of school and moved north. Despite running away, she stayed in weekly contact with her father. He reported her missing in 1998 after 2 weeks of radio silence. The name, the age, the dual nationality, the district, the time frame, all the details matched. It began to appear this case could have been resolved decades earlier had detectives not discounted Xiaowen due to the age discrepancy. Feeling embarrassed, detectives decided to compare DNA samples collected at the scene against Xiaowen's father. But at some point, those sample boxes had been thrown out. No matter, they thought. They'd simply exhume the burned woman's grave and take a sample directly. But unbelievably, no one had kept a note of where she was buried. It looked like they were stuck again. But then they got lucky. The forensics office found out someone had mixed up the 1998 and 1999 sample boxes. They compared it and got an exact match. The burned woman was indeed 17-year-old Xiaowen. With the victim officially identified and a living witness on record, police moved to arrest the 4 suspects Yihao had named. 3 were still in Taiwan. The 4th had fled overseas. Officers debated whether they should pick up the 3. Doing so would tip off the 4th. They held off for a year, but ultimately decided catching 3 out of 4 wasn't so bad. The suspects were all living in completely different areas, leading quiet family lives. 3 separate police units picked them up simultaneously and drove them straight to Fedan Road. When they got there, the lead officer asked, "Do you know who was burned here 2 decades ago?" He expected them to say no or throw each other under the bus. But instead, all three dropped to their knees and began apologizing to Xiaowen. From there, the full story came out. After running away from home at 15, Xiaowen drifted into a betel nut shop run by Little Pan, his girlfriend Ani, their friend Changbi, and a younger girl nicknamed Baby. Pan was the de facto leader, and he quickly took a liking to the new runaway. Before long, he offered her a job as a betel nut beauty, a young, scantily clad woman who attracts customers by sitting in the window. She was an immediate hit with the store's sleazy clientele, who referred to her as the Cherry Blossom Girl. The place wasn't much, but Xiaowen finally felt like she had found somewhere to belong. Over time, she grew especially close to the boss lady, Ani. At first, they were inseparable, but the closeness didn't last. Jealousy festered, and Ani began to suspect Xiaowen had feelings for Changbi. Problem was, so did Baby. Word spread, jealousy festered, and Baby made it her mission to teach Xiaowen a lesson. With the help of friends, she pinned Xiaowen down, beat her, and shaved her head. Humiliated, Xiaowen called her father. Through floods of tears, she said she needed money for a wig. But instead of offering sympathy, her father reprimanded her for getting involved with such low lives and hung up. It would be the last time he ever spoke with his daughter. On December 6, 1998, Little Pan realized money was coming up short. Someone was skimming from the register. Baby immediately accused Xiaowen of stealing, saying she had used the money to buy expensive jewelry. In a violent rage, Pan dragged the 17-year-old into a room above the store, tied her up, and locked her inside. So began Xiaowen's 72 hours of hell. From then on, Pan declared that Xiaowen was the store's punching bag. Whenever anyone felt in a bad mood, they were welcome to go upstairs and beat her. All four of them did, repeatedly, with fists and sticks. On December 7th, things spiraled. The group denied Xiaowen food and water, sliced her face and thighs with a machete, and beat her with a baseball bat, all while trying to force a confession about the missing cash. But her condition had deteriorated rapidly overnight, and she could barely speak. That's when Little Pan started to panic. He was a regular amphetamines user and feared Xiaowen would tell the police about his drug addiction. As an active duty soldier partway through mandatory national service, Pan knew if he was reported, he'd be tried in a military court and face severe punishment. On December 8th, his paranoia peaked, and he decided Xiaowen had to be silenced permanently. The other three agreed. After all, they were already in deep. There was just one problem. While they deliberated, the aforementioned Yi Hao arrived unannounced and came face to face with the four soon-to-be killers and their tied-up, soon-to-be victim. When the group noticed Yi Hao, they surrounded him and ordered him to hurt Xiaowen, technically making him an accomplice. He fled the first chance he got and didn't speak about what he had seen for 21 long years. After he left, the group decided to act. In the early hours of December 9th, Ani took thin sheets of joss paper, wetted them, and layered them over Xiaowen's face, blocking her airflow. When she was on the verge of losing consciousness, Changbi held her legs while Pan wrapped a towel around her neck. He inserted a stick and twisted until her cervical spine snapped. All the while, Baby stood by the door, acting as lookout. She now knew what would happen if the others found out the truth. That she was the one skimming money, not Xiaowen. After taking Shiawen's life, the perpetrators brought in a mystic who performed folk rites. Rather than call the police, she advised them to kill a black dog and sprinkle its blood over the corpse, not just to blind the victim's spirit so she couldn't find and haunt them, but so the animal would carry their sin into the afterlife, leaving them free of guilt. They followed the mystic's advice. After driving Shiawen out to Fudan Road and setting the fire, the group immediately dissolved the betel nut stand, scattered, and cut all contact. 21 years later, 3 of those perpetrators were finally in court in a trial, which began just 45 days before the statute of limitations would have expired. Despite their past confessions and expressions of remorse in front of the judge, they all pled not guilty and tried to pass the blame, each saying they only watched as the others killed Shiawen. At first, the judge gave the 2 main offenders life sentences. Baby, who was just a juvenile at the time, got 14 years and 10 months. However, on appeal, the court said the offenders had all been young, impulsive, and still reformable at the time of the crime, and cut the main sentences to 14 years and 6 months. Shiawen's father got nothing. His civil claim was rejected, and his daughter's remains were never located for a proper funeral. He told the media he regretted not being a better father. If he had been, he said, Shiawen would still be alive. He passed away in 2023, still angry and full of guilt. It's crazy to think this case could have been resolved much earlier had the forensics team not been so adamant about the victim's age. It's even crazier that it was finally resolved because a witness waited 21 years to pick up the phone, all because he said he was being haunted by a ghost and couldn't sleep anymore. And it's just infuriating that the perpetrators are serving such short sentences, with one getting away scot-free. Shiawen may finally have her name back, but she still hasn't been given the justice she deserves. We're in the final stretch now, and I need you to do one last thing. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Turn on notifications, because what comes next is the most disturbing case I've ever researched, and it's one the internet actually solved. Over the 10 years I've been making content, I've often said, this is one of the most disturbing mysteries I've ever covered. The longer you stare into the abyss of the internet, the darker the things you find. But today's subject genuinely might be the most disturbing thing I have ever encountered online. In my opinion, it belongs to a tier of horror most people never come across, and frankly, never should. What I'm about to discuss is not something you should ever go searching for. The raw footage is definitely not something you should seek out. Several months ago, I stumbled upon an article titled, "A Vietnamese Murder Has Given the World Its First Real Snuff Movie." It detailed the story of 3 video clips which surfaced on a shock site in late July 2025, a collection known as the Vietnamese Butcher. The most shared video, tentatively called The Execution, is as simple as it is horrifying. A top-down shot of a man lying on a tarp spread across a bathroom floor. Beneath his neck is a wooden chopping block. The muffled sound of dogs and vehicles can be heard in the distance, suggesting it was filmed in the middle of civilization. But there's nothing civilized about what happens next. When the man says he's about to finish, a second figure standing just off-screen steps into view, raises a meat cleaver, and in several brutal blows, severs his head. The grisly scene is all caught head-on in close-up detail. Blood sprays across the room. The victim's body twitches and goes limp. The executioner then immediately gets to work, pulling the man's head out of view and slicing apart his body with a level of precision that suggested this wasn't his first rodeo. The clip went viral almost immediately, mainly because of the impact it had on those who viewed it. Though most users of that site were well acquainted with footage of death and depravity, this video felt different, more coordinated, more professionally set up. The room had been properly lit. The framing was intimate, and as would later be revealed, the money shot had been filmed by multiple cameras set up around the room. The next video, filmed immediately after the execution, has been labeled "The Butchering" and shows the victim's body being methodically dismembered, limbs separated and arranged, organs washed in a sink, human meat placed in pots and on plates. But of the 3 videos that appeared in July, perhaps the most revealing is the first clip, the rehearsal. It shows the victim in a different location, an office setting, placing his head on a chopping block, while a figure wearing Adidas sportswear and a Guy Fawkes mask brings his cleaver down to the man's neck, as if illustrating how he plans to deliver the fatal blow. Towards the end, the kneeling man asks for the cameras to be turned off. The masked soon-to-be killer comforts his soon-to-be victim. Both men stand up, and the clip ends. The implication was clear. The victim wasn't only aware he was being filmed, but had willingly allowed himself to be killed for the purposes of cannibalization. As the morbidly curious would soon discover, the 3 Vietnamese butcher videos were only the tip of the iceberg. They were part of a pack consisting of 11 recordings and 98 photographs being advertised for sale on Telegram, an encrypted app often used by criminals. Limited access to this pack reportedly cost around $100 US, while full access set you back around $600. The pack had apparently been circulating on the black market since February, 5 months before parts of it were uploaded publicly. Not all of it has surfaced yet, but what has is enough to turn the stomach of even the most experienced investigator. In one series of leaked images, the victim's heart, kidneys, and other organs were shown cooked in an herbal stew with red dates and goji berries. Other parts were seemingly turned into a curry dish. In another set of images, the executioner can be seen posing in a mirror, holding the victim's freshly severed head. Now, countless death clips have circulated online over the years, but the Vietnamese butcher hit the internet like a freight train, with one outlet labeling the execution segment the first verified snuff video. Snuff is defined as a murder filmed for commercial distribution, not just videos of real killings, but content produced specifically to turn a profit. According to criminologists, no murder movies on the internet or otherwise had ever been produced for the primary purpose of turning a profit. Until now, perhaps. After reading about this case, I figured it made for a good segment, but I couldn't find any other English-language outlets covering the story. I waited for more information to come out, but it never did. The case faded from my mind. That is, until last week, when I was contacted by one of my viewers. This individual suggested I look into this mystery again, as there had recently been huge developments. They directed me to a 106-page dossier created by the OSINT and Cyber Investigation Vietnam community on Facebook. Operating in the shadows using burner accounts for their own safety, this group had been conducting their own investigation into the footage, collecting open-source evidence, In an effort to name the victim and unmask the killer, OSINT, as I'll refer to the Facebook group, began by doing a bit of Googling to see how much information about the Vietnamese butcher was already available. Not much came up. Despite the victim's face being clearly visible, his family, if he had any, hadn't stepped forward to identify him, and there was no indication the police were looking into the matter. However, because the circumstances were so rare, OSINT had a fairly good idea of where to begin. Up until that point, there had only been 2 other known cases where one human being had allowed themselves to be consumed by another, both occurring in Germany. The first was the infamous case of Armin Meiwes, who killed willing volunteer Bernd Brandes. The other was of policeman Detlef Gwenzel, who killed Polish businessman Wojciech Stempniewicz. In both instances, the participants had met through online cannibal forums. It stood to reason the same was true of the men in the Vietnamese butcher. Given that both the victim and the perpetrator spoke with authentic Vietnamese accents, OSINT sleuths began trolling through Vietnamese online groups dedicated to so-called long pork. It didn't take them long to identify the victim, a 36-year-old man called Nguyen Xuan Dat. Little is known about who Dat was as a person, as he lived an incredibly private life and had few known friends, at least in the real world. Online, however, he moved in very lively and very illicit circles. Since around 2019, Dat had been an active user of Motherless, an explicit file-sharing platform only accessible by VPN that catered to the most hardcore deviant tastes. On that site and various other extreme forums, he used variations of the handle Dat Beheading. His posts, both on Facebook and those more niche sites, were fixated on decapitation and cannibalism. Not of other people, but of himself. In one leaked message purported to have been written by Dat, he reasoned, "Not only am I ugly, but I'm also full of diseases. I can't afford to live freely like normal folks. I've depended on my parents my whole life. What else could I do? I truly am a prisoner of my own fate." Seemingly fed up with his lot in life, Dat withdrew from society and dedicated the rest of his existence to his deepest, darkest desire. Online, he spoke about his so-called final fantasy, to be slain at the peak of ecstasy by a female executioner and then eaten afterwards. It was a subject that wasn't out of place in the online spaces he frequented. For years, he rigorously tried to find someone who could make his dream a reality, and slowly amassed a virtual group of friends who displayed similarly abnormal psychological tendencies. Evidently, his attempt to find a female executioner was unsuccessful. Later, OSINT members managed to track down an account on a gay forum believed to belong to Dat. In one post, he shared his mobile number. They were able to trace that number back to an account which listed Dat's birth date as March 10th, 1989. Cross-referencing details, netizens were able to find a man with Dat's name and date of birth listed in a village registry. When 2 users called the village head directly, he confirmed there was a man by that name who left the village after his father passed. Dat's mother, his only known living relative, who reportedly struggles with mental health issues, lost contact with her son years prior, hence why nobody came forward to identify him when the video surfaced. Meanwhile, other users contacted the few friends listed on Dat's Facebook profile, hoping somebody would respond with a lead. One contact who used the alias File replied. File was a fellow decapitation fantasist. They claimed to have met Dat once briefly and said he worked as a fishmonger at a market in Hanoi. Crucially, Philae also stated they knew Dat's killer. It was a man they had both interacted with on various forms, a man who was part of their bizarre online community, a man by the name of Trung. According to Philae and others, Dat had been in contact with Trung for quite some time, but had become frustrated with him as he wouldn't commit to a firm execution date. Eventually, however, Trung did agree to kill Dat at a specific time and place. As shown in a screenshot, after the execution, Dat's account sent out a private message to one of his contacts which simply read, "Dat has been beheaded." It seems Trung didn't only have access to Dat's social media accounts, but was actively using them to stay in contact with his inner circle of death enthusiasts, perhaps in an attempt to fish for further victims. Searching for confirmation about Trung's involvement, OSINT investigators continued to message Dat's friends. One member responded and even claimed to be the killer in the videos. His confession was brief, and following it, he stopped responding. Following this, exchanges were found in which he offered his murder services. After combing through Dat's Facebook history, forum posts, and communications, the community put together a timeline. January 25th, 2025. On Facebook, Dat posted a worrying status update, which simply read, 3 hours left until the execution. On that same day, his various other forum accounts recorded their last ever activity. This is broadly considered to be the day the Vietnamese butcher was filmed, and Dat's life came to an end. February 25th, 2025, a message went out from Dat's account to one of his contacts explaining that Dat was dead. It's believed this message was actually sent by his executioner, Trung. That same month, the Vietnamese butcher videos and photos went up for sale on the black market. June 10th, 2025, Dat's Facebook account posted its final ever status update, which read, "From today, I'm logging off from this account for good." This was further evidence his killer had been maintaining his account. Following that final message, Dat's page remained online. When the Vietnamese butcher videos surfaced in July and his page began to receive traffic, the account was manually terminated, proving that someone was still monitoring it. So those investigating the mystery had found their victim and all but confirmed the time and date of his death. But the most pressing question still remained unanswered. Who was the masked man in the footage? The one they knew as Trung. Though some naively thought he was innocent of any wrongdoing because Dat willingly offered up his life, in no country in the world is it lawful to kill someone just because they give their consent. Whoever Trung was, he was 100% guilty of murder. Who knows how many other times this cleaver-wielding lunatic had preyed on vulnerable victims to fulfill his own twisted murder fantasies. It was imperative they track this man down and unmask him. Thankfully, they had something to work with. As mentioned, in one photo, Trung appeared in a mirror holding Dat's head, and enough of his features were visible to tease out details. He had a stocky build, a receding or balding hairline, a scar over one eyebrow, monolid eyes, and most importantly, he had a striking birthmark pattern on his arm and armpit, and a tattoo reading "That Day 13-9. Hunting for more clues, netizens began examining Trung's surroundings. In the butchering video, he moved through what looked like a small kitchen with blue and white pattern floor tiles, red baseboards, a green door, red wall tiles around the counter, and a white countertop. At one point, a water bottle was visible on a table, as was a yellow bottle of Chinese brand washing up liquid near the sink. Some users said the decor, utensils, and cleaning products looked exactly like those seen and sold in Vietnam's northern border provinces, which helped narrow down the search. But frustratingly, that's where OSINT hit a dead end. By late August, the case was burning out. For months, no new developments were announced. It seemed like the Vietnamese butcher was destined to join the countless other internet mysteries that would forever remain unsolved. But then, just last month, the story exploded again. In the third week of November 2025, an anonymous Facebook user stepped forward and claimed to have been in direct contact with both Dat and the executioner. This person shared fresh screenshots of their final correspondence from Dat, which they received on January 25, 2025. In a message sent at 2:40 p.m., Dat told them the execution would occur in about 3 hours, putting his time of death somewhere around 5:30 to 6 p.m. Dat also mentioned having shared the whistleblower's details with the executioner, suggesting they were considering offering themselves up to be butchered. Since then, they had clearly changed their mind. Instead of stepping into the executioner's path, they were stepping forward to help advance the investigation. Crucially, the whistleblower released their chat history with the supposed killer, a man whose name on Facebook was Cam Tran Trung. In those messages, Trung said that Dat's bones had already become fertilizer. He invited the whistleblower to discuss his upcoming beheading in person and asked to meet at a specific address, a street in a town in Lang Son province. The pin seemed to be just outside a government tax department. For the first time, the hunt for Trung had something solid, a full name and a physical location. Enter a YouTube channel called The Curious One. This creator had been covering the case for some time using 3D reconstructions of the crime scene. Now, with the name and address, he started cross-referencing everything the community had found with public social media profiles and stated he had identified the killer. However, before he could reveal anything specific, he presumably received some form of death threat and posted, "The forces behind this are too powerful enough to swallow our entire team, so the investigation will end here." He also said that if anything happened to him, all the information he had found would become public. Along with that message, he shared a partial image of the suspect's face and a blurred screenshot of one of his usernames. It didn't take long for OSINT members to unblur that name. From that point, the web of connections began to form. The handle and similar variants appeared across multiple platforms: anonymous forums, Instagram, TikTok. Crucially, many of them were linked with a Twitter account, which in turn linked back to a Facebook account, one belonging to Don Van Sang, a seemingly normal married father of 2 in his late 50s who lived in Lang Son, close to the Chinese border. He was a retired deputy head of a market management department team, as well as the head of Lang Son City's Don family, a large clan with thousands of members. Sang's photos showed a man who lived a comfortable lifestyle. He held a senior bureaucratic role, enjoyed a large amount of status within his community, and had strong ties to the government, not only through his own work, but also through his wife and sons. Could he really be the Trung people were searching for? Well, as it would turn out, Sang's eldest son was named Tran Trung, and that same son's birthday just so happened to be the 13th of September. That day, 13 to 9. It was a coincidence that was hard to ignore, as were the clothes his son had been pictured wearing, which matched perfectly with the clothes worn by the masked figure in the rehearsal video. Though some think this points towards Sang's son being involved in the production, the masked individual clearly has a receding hairline and a body type that more closely matches suspect Sang. Perhaps he borrowed his son's sportswear. Perhaps they owned a matching pair. Either way, private messages sent by the Kamtran Trung profile contained photos which strongly suggested the person operating the account was indeed Sang, and that he was simply using his own child's name online as a cover. So though some think Sang may not have been working alone, there's zero evidence at this point that his son was involved in any way. People began poring over Sang's old photos and started comparing images side by side. What they found was chilling. Sang had a circular birthmark on his shin, which matched a mark visible on the executioner's leg. A prominent birthmark on his right bicep and armpit area was also very similar to the one seen in the butcher's photos. Scars and marks on Sang's face lined up with those seen on the killer, as did the tattoo placement. His hairline and facial structure were eerily similar. An image showing the outside of Sang's house also contains another hidden detail: a pair of flip-flops identical to the ones worn by the killer in the execution clip. Digging deeper, people soon found a TikTok video Sang had filmed at a market management building. The background of the office he filmed in was identical to that seen in the rehearsal video, down to the same plastic plants, blue fan blades, and misaligned cabinets. Others dug up a news article which included a photo taken at the department's old location where Sang was second in command. In the image, Sang can be seen inspecting some goods in front of what looked like the same kitchen seen in the butchering video, with the same green doors, red tile trim, blue floor tiles, red kitchen wall tiles, and white countertop. The location of the execution video couldn't be determined at the time, as it was filmed in a generic bathroom. Though it doesn't make sense that the killer would transport a dead body to a different location for butchering. Using common sense, the most likely place for the execution to have taken place is the same building as where the butchering was conducted. Images have since leaked from inside the department's bathroom, now known as the most miserable toilet in the world. Looks familiar, right? Sang retired from his position in 2025, but was still working for the market management department when Dat was killed. But why would a government employee commit a crime inside his own workplace? Doesn't that strike you as risky? Well, there's actually a grim logic to his choice of venue. The assumed execution date, January 25th, was the beginning of the Tet holiday when the Vietnamese ring in the Lunar New Year. On that day, government offices would have been deserted. On top of that, a market management department office would have a kitchen, cooking gear, and an incinerator for destroying confiscated goods. Sang supposedly volunteered to remain at the office for 5 days during that Lunar New Year period, while all the other officers and employees took a break. As the online dragnet tightened, Sang found himself at the center of a digital storm. For months, he had secretly been a member of online communities discussing the case, including the OSINT Facebook group. He was monitoring the investigation, reading the threads, commenting on the updates, no doubt feeling a thrill at being the hidden villain in a story the whole country was whispering about. He had even reacted with laughing emojis when users expressed their frustration at the investigation's dwindling progress. After being exposed, however, he began leaving his own series of bizarre and agitated posts on the group's timeline, saying things like, "I am the executioner. Who can catch me? Let me tell you straight, you are the real executioners because you want people to die so that you can celebrate. I've lived 60 years in this world. I'm no longer afraid of death. Anyone who wants to meet me is invited to my house. To some, This looked like the guilty flailing of a man suddenly realizing the internet had found him out. To others, it was the panicked confusion of someone being falsely accused on a massive scale. Perhaps out of loyalty, Sang came to his own defense in an equally strange way, posting and later deleting a photo of his lunch with the caption, "Come on, it's just a few pieces of human meat," likely just a taunting bit of dark humor. At this juncture, the evidence was compelling. Digital forensics added more layers. Some users attempted to reset the passwords for 2 of Sang's email addresses, which both routed two-factor authentication through the same device. Password reset attempts for an email linked to Dat's phone number also pinged from that same device. Another entry into OSINT's growing list of coincidences. Looking at the digital trail associated with Sang's online handles, a disturbing profile emerged. The man behind those accounts appeared to have started out using social media to seek casual flings and flirtations. Then, over the course of 2 decades, gradually adopted a master persona, someone who wants to dominate, humiliate, and torture his partners. Eventually, he developed an obsession with cutting and cannibalism. In 2022, Sang uploaded photos of a dismembered body to a forum, saying he wanted to toughen up the other members. The images were later removed, and where he sourced them from remains unclear. Screenshots also show him trying to order sliced-off pieces of male anatomy from suppliers in southern Vietnam, parts believed to have come from gender affirmation surgeries or from men willing to sell body parts for money. In the eyes of the Vietnamese online community, the stack of coincidences against Sang, the body marks, the tattoo, the kitchen, the office, devices, addresses, handles, the post history was all enough to label him the prime suspect. Now, they just needed the authorities to actually investigate and confirm their suspicion through the use of forensics. Yet, despite being made aware of the Vietnamese butcher videos, for months, the authorities sat on their hands. Comments made on the police page asking them to take action were seemingly deleted. Some called this laziness. Others thought they were trying to protect Vietnam's safe image. Others still labeled them corrupt. Given Sang's status and ties to the party, many feared he may have been using his influence to shut down the investigation and, given the attention he was now receiving, might start to target individual members of the OSINT group. As a safety precaution, the majority of members continued their investigation anonymously. After spending months compiling digital breadcrumbs and spreading awareness, the then 20,000-strong OSINT community created the 106-page document detailing their findings, going so far as to translate it into English for maximum reach. The PDF went viral. In a matter of days, the Facebook group exploded in size, and their evidence became too compelling to ignore. On November 28, 2025, it was quietly announced that Sang had been arrested and that the suspected crime scene had been sealed off for forensic testing. According to a translation of the police report, they found 3 teeth suspected to be human under the kitchen sink, as well as numerous bone fragments located in the septic tank of the restroom, in the drainage cavity in the kitchen, and in the water channel behind the kitchen. Forensic tests are still ongoing. The report also states they conducted a search of Sang's home. This resulted in the discovery and seizure of 2 jackets matching what the perpetrator was seen wearing in the rehearsal video, as well as a space heater matching one scene in the execution video. Investigators also seized a mobile phone believed to have belonged to Dat, which was being used by Sang's elder sister. When questioned, she said Sang had given her the phone to use. Following his arrest, Sang admitted to being behind the Vietnamese butcher. His official confession, as it currently stands, reads as follows. Around 2020, Sang became acquainted with Dat through social media. After talking for a period of time, Dat confided in Sang that he was participating in a group operating through a website called Motherless. Dat repeatedly invited Sang to join this group. At first, Sang found it barbaric and didn't dare join or participate. However, Sang continued to learn and research various types of sexual violence and eventually joined. Dat continued telling Sang about his wish to be slain in a specific manner. At one point, Dat told Sang he was willing to pay 10 million dong, around $380, to rent a location where this scenario could be carried out. By July 2024, Sang agreed and expressed the desire to perform the slaying as Dat wished. On the 25th of January 2025, Sang summoned Dat to the Market Management Building. When Dat arrived, he brought 2 cleavers for Sang to use. At around dusk, Sang killed Dat exactly as shown in the video clip circulated online. After killing Dat, Sang used a knife to cut the victim's body into multiple sections, separating bones, flesh, and internal organs. He placed the parts into a pot and boiled them with the stated purpose of preventing rapid decomposition and odor. He then smashed the bones and placed both bone and flesh into approximately 10 plastic bags, a small portion of which was reportedly fed to dogs. He disposed of the remains at various locations, mainly by throwing them into public trash bins. As for the 2 cleavers used as the weapons, on the 27th of January, while traveling home from work, Sang disposed of them by placing them into the container of a handcart parked along the roadside. Some people take umbrage with how Sang's confession is presented, saying he's spinning the situation so that he sounds like the victim, that he was effectively hypnotized or manipulated by Dat into following his instructions, when there's plenty of evidence he had been digging around in depraved online rabbit holes for decades. His post history, in which he talks about wanting to kill and eat people, and just 2 weeks after killing Dat, was actively trying to recruit the whistleblower as his next victim. Obviously, this is a very recent case, and information is still coming out as we speak. Still, thanks in large part to the work of the OSINT Facebook group, Doan Van Sang will stand trial for Dat slaying and, depending on how things proceed, could face the death penalty. But this may not be the end of the story. Now, with more information to work with, it's clear this case doesn't meet the strict definition of snuff, as Sang had filmed the videos primarily to fulfill his own twisted desires. Profit came secondary to that. But what if Sang wasn't actually the one selling the content? As mentioned, before surfacing on shock sites, the Vietnamese butcher was being distributed by unknown Chinese-speaking individuals through encrypted messaging apps. At present, we don't know if that was Sang, people he had shared the content with online, or more worryingly, dark web associates who had helped him produce his home movies. This has led many to come up with a dark theory, that Sang wasn't some lone wolf, but part of a broader black market of snuff traders operating throughout East and Southeast Asia. Other similar cases have already started to surface, with users selling real footage of chopped-up Asian men. As uncovered in one article, one message from a Chinese distributor selling his wares read, "Price is 89 Wen to join the regular group, 198 to join the large group." It's a stable group that's been around for 4 or 5 years, tens of thousands of users, dumping corpses, body dismembering, executions, etc. And that's perhaps the most disturbing part of this entire saga, that the Vietnamese butcher could just be one small piece of a giant puzzle, that there are potentially many more videos just like it being bought and sold by nefarious individuals that have yet to be leaked. People who kill others because they ask for it, or in some cases, just because they can get away with it. People who sell human organs as exotic meat. People who sell them for transplant. There's certainly a market for it. Perhaps time will tell whether that's true or not. What is certain is that this particular case has rocked Vietnam to the core. And while official channels remain pretty quiet, the only thing ordinary people can do is keep the story alive so that it isn't buried under the next wave of headlines. The internet is a double-edged sword. It can unite strangers to solve the unsolvable, give voices to the voiceless, and shine light into the darkest corners. But it can also spread misinformation, turn tragedy into entertainment, and sometimes make mysteries even darker. The 17 cases we've explored today show both sides of that coin. Some were solved because of online sleuths. Others became twisted beyond recognition. And a few remain unsolved, haunting message boards to this very day. If you made it this far, I want to thank you for listening. These stories aren't easy to hear, but they deserve to be told. They deserve to be remembered. Before you go, do me one last favor. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Leave a like on this video. And in the comments, let me know which case affected you the most. Your engagement helps ensure these forgotten stories won't be forgotten. Until next time, stay safe out there.